Senator Kennedy, thank you so much for being here with us. We really appreciate it.
Glad to, Faith. Thank you for having me.
So I want to ask you about the tort reform legislation. Right now, where is it?
Two bills, Senate Bill 68 and Senate Bill 69, passed out of Senate Judiciary Committee about 9 days ago, and it is making its way through the process. I would expect it will be up in the Rules Committee within the next few days, and possibly be on the floor as soon as maybe this Friday.
Is that the goal, to try to get it on the floor and through the floor, at least on the Senate, before crossover day?
Yes, of course. We need to get that done to make sure that it's alive and is over to the House so they can consider it before, or we get it to them before crossover day so they can consider it.
During his State of the State, we know that the governor has made this his top priority of this session, even saying that if you guys don't get this done, you're going to be called back for a special session. Do you echo how important this is for the governor? Is it as important to you as well?
It absolutely is, and I could not agree more. I don't know if you were here for the press conference day that the governor had a few weeks ago about this bill. But as has been said by so many people here at the Capitol, there were more people here that came from all over the state, from all walks of life, from small business to big business to individuals, that were here saying we've got to have some relief. Consumers need some help. Insurance premiums continue to escalate and go higher and higher. That's putting a burden on our job creators, folks back home trying to make ends meet. It's causing businesses to close their doors, and so we've got to do something. And there is a cry from Georgia asking for help with tort reform, and that's what these two bills do.
Can you explain to the consumer, if this does pass, what does that savings look like? Two-parter here. When would they see those savings, and how much would they be saving?
Sure. So the problem that we've got is that we have and need to make some tweaks to our civil justice system. And to be sure, no one is advocating that folks that go to the courthouse ought not be fully and fairly compensated. So let's make sure everybody understands that. Beyond that, the process that we're advocating and making small tweaks to the rules that apply to civil litigation should have the effect to stabilize insurance rates that right now are out of control. The governor did and engaged in a tort data collection process where he engaged our insurance commissioner to come in. That report was produced and really informed the governor's office and many of us on what tort reform ought to look like to stabilize insurance rates, bring competition back to this market, make it a good environment for insurance companies to come back. All that will work to decrease and put pressure on prices so that consumers will enjoy that over time.
Do we know a timeline though? So let's say this passes this session, mom and pop down the street, or even in Macon, right? They have their insurance premiums. Do we know, would it take a year for them to start seeing that decrease, 10 years?
There's no way to know. Certainly don't think it'll be 10 years, but there's no way to put a particular time frame on it. The one time frame I can give you is that if we don't pass tort reform this year, what we are guaranteed to happen tomorrow, next week, and next year is our premiums will continue to go up. We're trying to do something to stabilize this market so that those prices, the premiums will stabilize over time with greater competition and better rules on how civil tort actions are brought and managed and resolved. That will bring stability to the market, which will reverse this trend that we've had for so long.
Do you all have like a ballpark of how much money people could save? I know you mentioned insurance premiums would go up if this doesn't pass. Is there a trend that you're seeing of how much more people will be paying or how much less they would be paying if this passes?
Well, if you look at the increases that folks have been suffering under for the last 2 to 3 years, it's typically double digits, depending upon the business or the profession that you're in. If you talk to some of our medical care professionals, particularly people in the OBGYN sector, they will tell you they have seen 50, 60, 70% increases in their malpractice insurance. What has that done? That is make doctors make decisions about not coming to Georgia and going to other states where those medical malpractice premiums are a small fraction of what they would pay here in Georgia. What is that causing? That's causing a lack of care and availability of medical services to Georgians. I'm from a small town in southeast Georgia. I know rural Georgia. That's particularly a problem when you're in an area where doctors aren't just down the street. So it touches so many different areas of our society. So that's why the overall picture is trying to bring that stability back to these markets so that rates will go down. But the ripple effect will be very positive for Georgians, for job creators, for businesses, and quite frankly, for all of us.
Can I ask you this? There's some concern among your constituents and others in Georgia that this will benefit the insurance companies, the big box stores, the businesses more than the little guy, the people down in Macon, the people here in Atlanta. Who benefits more from this, the little guy or the insurance companies?
I would say the little guy and businesses and all of Georgians. If you think about how insurance works, claims are made against a policy that is then used to compensate people. When the cost of doing business in Georgia for any insurance continues to go up because of nuclear verdicts, because of insurance companies are scared to try cases in our court system because of the verdicts and the amounts that have been paid that are irrational related to what the harm or the injury is, they settle claims at a much higher rate. All that puts upward pressure on cost. And the question really is, who ultimately pays that? And it's all of us. Those costs are seen in the premiums that everyone pays. I mean, the insurance industry is a competitive industry, but it's also a regulated industry, right, through our insurance commissioner. And so that process of what we're living with right now, you're not seeing that just with one insurance company or one sector or one part of the state. It's across the broad spectrum. And that's how we know we've got an inherent problem in the rules that apply when these lawsuits are tried.
What is your answer to people who believe that if this passes, that's just going to give insurance companies, doctors' offices, other businesses the green light? Okay, we know that we are only going to have to pay out, let's say, $300,000 for this. So we're just going to do whatever we want to do, and we don't care about this person. What is your response to people who feel like that might happen if this passes?
Sure. My first response would be, say, first read the bill, because there's nothing in this bill that puts on caps for the recovery that plaintiffs would be entitled to enjoy. Secondly, nothing about this bill or any of the efforts are seeking to reduce the discretion of the jury in doing their job in making fair compensation awards to plaintiffs. So for those that are concerned about that, I would say don't buy the message that's being put out there by others that like the system we have because they are enjoying great riches off of it, while the rest of us and all of Georgians and hardworking Georgians are paying for it through the premiums and other costs. You know, the United States Chamber of Commerce has done an estimate that the average cost to a household in Georgia is $5,050 per year per household, just because of this difficult tort reform environment we have. That's significant. Folks all across Georgia are paying for that, and it needs to change.
Are you confident that if this passes this year, the tort reform, that it will be a different scenario than what we saw 20 years ago when there was sweeping tort reform legislation that was basically blocked by judges in Georgia?
Yes, I would say that this bill is very targeted. For example, one of the provisions deals with what a lot of people think of as premises liability problems, and that is where simply because you're a landowner or you operate a business, a commercial business, whether it's a very small one or a large one, that we now are in an environment where people will sue for anything that happens on the property. And some of the examples that people are familiar with is where third-party actors, such as criminals, come on someone's property, engage in some criminal conduct, someone gets harmed or, God forbid, gets killed, and then they decide to sue the property owner, even though the property owner was totally uninvolved. We are in this bill addressing the issue of negligent security, and that is, what are the guardrails and what are the standards when someone can be claimed successfully to have not provided proper security for someone being on the property. So that's one example of where it's targeted. The other areas, the 9 or the 8 different sections in the bill, are very targeted. They're very limited, and they don't, for example, contain caps that were a part of the tort reform measures years ago. So yes, I think this bill is entirely sustainable. In fact, I've not even heard the suggestion that there's some problem with that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I want to change the topic and ask you about Senate Bill 123 and why you decided to bring it forward.
Gladly. Thank you for asking. Senate Bill 123 deals with the chronic problem we have in Georgia of chronic absenteeism. That is, students that are missing 10% or more of their days in school. So that basically means they're missing 18 days or more. So the next question people say is, well, how big of a problem is it? 380,000 Georgia students last year were chronically absent. If they're not in their seats learning, they can't learn to read. If they're not reading, they're not going to be literate, they're not going to pass the test, they're not going to graduate. So this came on my radar screen because of something I saw in another state. I came home and looked at it and said, we need to see if there's a problem in Georgia, and in fact there is. Pre-COVID, we were at about 9.5% absenteeism. During the COVID years, it spiked at about 25, 26%. We're now back at 21.5%, 22%, but that's still not acceptable, Faith. We've got to do something to make sure that kids are encouraged to go to school, to get that education. Those days in school aren't just about learning enough to pass the test. It's also the time that they need in school to give them that aha moment of where they're engaged or exposed to someone in a particular field that they may want to have a job in one day, or something that inspires them. The time in school is critical, and we've got to make sure that they're there. Last thing I'll say is the solutions are going to be found at the local level. This is not a Senate bill to tell everybody this is how you fix your absenteeism problem. It is really to enliven the locals to make sure that they're working to identify the schools that have an absenteeism problem, look for the solutions, and then implement those solutions from a community-based standpoint, including not just the student, but the parents, people in the community, and of course the school.
And just for those who have not heard of the bill, if it passes, how exactly does the state level funnel down to the local level to assist them with programs?
Sure. So two things. This really bootstraps off of a model that was created in 2005. And we have the models that it's called a school climate committee that is done on a county-wide basis that looks to see which schools are meeting the standards and which are not. The Chief Superior Court judge of that county is there to make sure that those committees are actually meeting. And if we have a school system or a particular school that's not meeting the metrics, then you have a team that gets together and says, let's identify the problem. If it's 10% or more for a school system, then that's when the obligations kick in. If a particular school has an absentee rate of 15% or higher, then additional obligations and additional teams have to look at that school in particular and find solutions to help the kids.
All right. Well, thank you for breaking it down for us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And thank you so much for
You're
the time.
welcome. Thank you, Faith.